Welcome to the Voices of the River webinar series by the Evenlode Catchment Partnership. This series focuses on hosting water industry experts to present on a variety of topics to educate, inspire, and empower people towards positive change for our waterways. I'm Jennifer Lanham from the Cotswold National Landscape.
And I'm Sam Frith from Earthwatch Europe.
Today's presenter is Heather Moore. She's the Waterscapes Officer for Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. Heather is dedicated to promoting conservation and sustainability, and over the last 20 years has worked to drive education and solutions-based engagement. Heather's career has led her to creating nature highways and waterscapes, improving green and blue infrastructure for wildlife conservation and for public well-being. Most recently, she has implemented a £400,000 project of natural flood management strategies to alleviate flash flooding in Gloucestershire and to build community resilience. Heather has a genuine passion for sustainability and thinks that everyone should have a rain garden. Welcome, Heather. We're really looking forward to your presentation today.
Hello, thank you very much for having me, both of you. So to get started, I will share my screen. So bear with me. And then we will begin. Right. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's good.
Great. So I am the project officer for a program at the Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust called Waterscapes, a project called Waterscapes. And this 2 years funded by an insurance company, RSA project. Its aims were to demonstrate what we as a community can come together to do to make ourselves more resilient against flash flooding. I don't need to tell you that we are facing dire flooding. We see it every day. Every time you turn the news on, there is another flooding incident, and obviously it's not just within our island. It is all across the world. You're an educated bunch, but just to lay it out very plainly, the climate is warming, and when the climate warms, it holds more water, and that water then falls as rain, and that rain is falling on ground which is less and less permeable to that water. And so it suddenly surges over the concrete. It suddenly surges into our sewage and our storm drain infrastructure, and it completely overloads our systems, and so it backs up and it floods, and then it surges into the rivers, and then it picks up all of that pollution. So even if the flood isn't that bad, you're still going to be picking up all of the particles, all of the pesticides, all of the sediment. And then if it's really bad, then you're going to be picking up all of the engine oil and the diesel and the sewer material, the effluent that's then going to flood into our rivers. So that's just laying out a brief overview of what the problem is. And our project has demonstrated what we can do. So the first examples I'm going to show you are on a bigger landscape scale, but that doesn't mean that communities can't come together and make this happen. And then I'm going to narrow it down so that we can see how you on a personal level can make these differences. And if everyone makes a change, then together we're going to make a really, really big difference. So this is Plock Court in Gloucester. It may not look like it, but this was once a cricket field, a playing field where children, families would come, dog walkers, and over the years it flooded. Scrapes and swales like this were dug. The previous ones had a 300,000 litre storage capacity for the flood water, and that was soon breached. And so our project has part funded the digging of 4 more of these scrapes, so that there is now a storage capacity of 1.3 million litres of water. The water has still breached, so it's really demonstrating that we have too much water. We don't really want to see our very rare public recreation spaces given over to floodplain. It's not ideal, but I guess it's very, very suggestive of what is needing to happen. And so we're going to have to get a lot smarter about our future infrastructure design in urban areas to accommodate this level of water that we're seeing. So I haven't included the very recent photos. The boardwalks have now gone in, but it looks like a sludge mud nightmare. So this looks a bit nicer. So if you do go down to Plock Court in Gloucester, maybe give it a couple of months for the mud to settle. And a series of boardwalks are now in, so that you can really appreciate this beautiful landscape. And it is a beautiful landscape. I say that we don't want to replace the recreational areas with wetlands. Wetlands are obviously incredibly important. They are huge carbon sequesters, and they are in decline, and so we need them. So this is a very delicate ecosystem, and so please do come and appreciate it. Dogs on leads, please. And lots of other work is happening here. So lots of native trees and shrubs have been grown. And for example, one large established oak tree can take up 100 gallons of water in a day, so it's soaking it up, and the water is transpiring out of its leaves back up into the atmosphere and storing it as well. So every tree has a huge capacity to hold back some of that water. This is a swale that we had dug at Naunton Park in Cheltenham. Naunton flooded in 2007, along with lots of other places around the country, but Naunton, the gardens were flooded for days and days and days. And so this is a swale that has a 35,000 litre capacity. And you can see that it's got a drain on it, so that if it gets too high, the water will just go back into the storm drains. But you can see the need for it. Pathways were also implemented to keep the compaction of the ground to a minimum and to keep it in one pathway. So that's going to really help because with soil, we want it as spongy as possible. We want as many air particles as possible in the soil structure to stop that inability of the soil to hold the water and for it to surge off. And if that water is surging off, it's gushing into the rivers. And if a salmon, for example, has just spawned, all of its eggs are going to be washed away, and the eggs will also die because the sediment in the water is so high it can't receive the oxygen that it needs. So if we can keep our soils as healthy as possible, you know, compost your vegetables, your green waste, keep adding as a topsoil, keep carbon sequestering with this healthy soil. The soil is the key to preventing the flooding. At Robinswood Hill in Gloucester, which is where the Wildlife Trust is based, do come and visit. It's a beautiful park. We have done extensive tree felling to create leaky dams. So leaky dams basically means when a big surge of rain, the rain will build up behind those tree structures, create little sort of pond lagoon areas, and that just slows the flow, and then the water slowly leaks through. We did this a lot with ash, because a lot of the ash needed felling anyway, and as soon as you open up the canopy, you let the light in, it increases the roughage of the ground cover, and that will then allow more absorption and more interception of the rain when it comes. So do come and have a look at some of, and we've got lots of other features that I will talk through in this talk, but that can be demonstrated at Robinswood Hill. So the permeable paving, the rain gardens, the leaky dams. So do come and have a look, and it's very accessible for wheelchairs and prams. We also demonstrated how important driveways are in the fight against flooding. So this was one of our driveways. This is Chris's house, and as you can see, very impermeable block paving slabs, nothing growing on any of the walls. He does have a water butt, we'll give him that, but all of the rain would just wash off of his driveway, and it would go straight down onto the Cirencester Road and create problems further down. So this is what it looked like after we had some fun with it. So we used recycled grid structures to hold in stone with a permeable sub base. So all the water now is just draining down, and it's actually sand underneath the Cirencester Road area. So it's incredibly absorbent. You could get a metal pole and just go push it down and down and down. So there shouldn't be flooding on sand. So it just shows you the degree to which it's been covered up. We created a section through the middle of the driveway. You can't quite see it because the plants aren't established as much as they could be, but those plants will be in the center of the four wheels, so when you've gone out to work, it will get the sunlight, and your wheels will just drive around that. There's planting on the left, and then and then as you can see, we've got a bin store, which I'll talk about in one moment after I've just gone through the structure of the driveways for you. So you've got four main options if you want to convert your driveway. The first one you can see here, this very lovely driveway, is resin. It is chemically, but it does create a good effect, and it is permeable. And then the three perhaps more affordable options are your stone, your permeable paving, which is basically just paving blocks with gaps in between where you put stones in, so it goes through the gaps and the stones stop the weeds from going through. And then you've got this like concrete lattice where you can either just have grass, or you could have, you know, a bit more exciting ideas like sedum, and sedum is very resilient to being trodden on, very good for absorbing pollution from the atmosphere, and is drought tolerant. So these are some of the features. If you look at the right hand side, this was Claire's driveway, and Claire already had a really nice drive, but to make it better, so to modify your current driveway, if you think, you know, oh, I've just spent, you know, loads of money on it, it looks great, but I do want to do something for the flooding, for the fight against flooding, then you can take out little sections of your driveways. So very easily demonstrated here by planting some drought tolerant, I think that's all breccia in there maybe. And you can also put like a bowl at the front of your driveway to capture that excess runoff, and it just slowly seeps into the bowl, and it's basically just an indent at the front of your driveway with a permeable sub base, and so it soaks away and stops it from going out onto the main road. And then, as you can see in the middle, the downpipe is no longer just going straight out onto the concrete and pouring away down the street. The downpipe is going into a pond, and in that container we have your lilies and your oxygenating, can't quite say that word, plants that create oxygen, so that you create a little aquatic ecosystem. You don't have to turn it into a pond, you can just use it as a water butt so that you can water your plants. And then up on the top left, you can see that we have the bin store, and it has a sedum roof. So you can create more surface to absorb the rain. And I like to think of it, if you've taken away a surface by building your house, then you're sort of giving it back with the green roof. And actually green roofs have been shown that they can absorb 90% of that rainfall in any given rain event. And then obviously you're creating lots of pollen and nectar for pollinating plants. And in these urban areas, it's more important than ever that we create these little lifelines for our wildlife. So in total, we've removed 75 cubic meters of impermeable surface and made it permeable. And the potential in urban areas for holding back the water is really extreme. So 24,000 litres of water run off of each roof. So that's the equivalent of 150 water butts a year that you could be holding back and using to water your plants, fill up your pond, wash your car with, whatever, wash the dog. So the potential is great. So continuing down that route of what people can do, here we have a rain garden. I don't know if any of you have heard of rain gardens, but we at the Wildlife Trust have been building lots of them. and on average they have the capacity to hold back on average 500 litres of water at any one time. And how they work is, instead of, as I said, that downpipe, which would normally just be spewing out its water onto a pavement, that downpipe is disconnected and it's diverted into a garden. That water percolates through, is filtered through the soil, it's filtered through, we use leca, which is a heated clay ball which absorbs lots of moisture and also filters out any debris or pollution, and then it goes into a drainage pipe at the bottom that you can see, and then typically nothing will come out of the other end. If it's a huge thunderstorm, then you can see that water can indeed come out, and that will then be redirected into the drainage system. But it's hugely reduced in the volume, it's cleaned, and it has watered a garden for you. So that's a rain garden in a nutshell. And we have built, we would have built 4 in total for this project. This one is one we're very proud of. It's at the Royal Gloucestershire Hospital. As you can see from the middle picture, it's also a seat, so you can sit. You might be having a tricky time at the hospital, and you can sit and hear the water trickling and see it trickling down this rain slide. The rain slide isn't quite finished being built yet, but any day now, so keep an eye if you have an appointment or an emergency, hopefully not, at the hospital. It's just on the left hand side before you go into the emergency area. So you can see that downpipe at the back just goes straight down, and that just normally would go straight down into the drain. And as you can imagine, the roofs at the hospital are huge. So this one has an 800 litre capacity, and that water is going to trickle down into the rain garden, and we're going to have some beautiful metal aquatic themed artwork at the back of it, so it's going to be a really, really beautiful thing to behold, and I really like something that is both beautiful and functional. So if every building could have a rain garden, then flooding would be hugely reduced. So moving on, the hospital rain garden, as you could see, was in a container. It was above the ground, but it doesn't have to be. You can go straight into the ground. I guess normally, like a normal garden would be, but the rain garden is different in that it reconnects to the drainage system, so it doesn't have the danger of flooding, which is great. That's what we want. So the downpipe on the right here, this is outside Co-op in Warden Hill, so please do go and have a look. We're currently recruiting for volunteers to help us look after this rain garden, so do get in touch with us if you live locally. So the downpipe on the right is disconnected and feeds this garden, and it was actually Ali, our coordinator, who built this garden, and it's, as I'm sure you all agree, it's absolutely wonderful. It's definitely medal worthy if it was at a competition, I think. And as you can see, you can walk through it. it will look a lot better come spring because the plants have just been planted. But you can walk through it, you can really engage with this garden, and soon the interpretation will be up, so that you can see exactly how it works. But this area will hold back 5,000 litres at any one time of rainwater. And Warden Hill is an area where the water gushes down Warden Hill. So it's a really important spot for holding that water back. And in terms of diverting water, just opposite the road, we're also going to be doing a green verge so that some of that water that's coming down the hill will be siphoned off into a green verge, and will be used to feed more plants. Unfortunately, we have to close the road to do that, so we are a little bit delayed with that. Also, what is taking a long time is getting a new bus shelter for this area, but it is happening, and as demonstrated with the driveways, you can have a green roof on a bus shelter. You may have seen them around. So all of these things make a difference, and if it can be incorporated into our urban infrastructure, then it's imperative, basically. So some areas of support. This is very Gloucestershire based, but there are grants of up to £5,000 available from the Gloucestershire County Council to manage the risk to your property, whether it's personal or a business property. So please do look into them. Flood wardens are a wonderful way of community members looking at an area, a catchment area perhaps. It doesn't have to be to do with flash flooding, but looking at an area and saying, okay, what can be done? What resources do we need? What support do we need? Let's go and do this. So if you can gain support on becoming a flood warden, then please do check out some of these websites. Next Door Nature has great advice for funding and support, and there are lots of other places for support, but these ones I think would be a good one to explore. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Fab, thank you so much. I'm just trying to do all the technical bits and taking spotlights off of people, etc., etc. Thank you, that was really great. Has anybody joining us got some questions? I haven't seen anything in the chat, but now is your opportunity. Raise your virtual hand if you've got a question. Jennifer, you're normally full of questions. Have you got anything? You're on mute still. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, brilliant, Heather. As you were describing all of these different projects, I just imagined the BBC doing a program like this where they just, they fly in and they dig everything up and they make this beautiful garden. And I just thought you definitely need to approach them with that idea, because, just putting in gardens just to, for people to visually enjoy, I think is a thing of the past to me. I see nothing worse than, kind of a desert monoculture in most gardens, of just green grass, or worse, astroturf. But how empowering would it be to have that actually as a TV show, and explaining the climate impact and the flooding reduction that is involved in this sort of thing, because I think there's a lot of potential there. I was wondering if you want to come and do my driveway, first of all. But I live in a new build, and I was thinking, they're kind of picky. I have to have I can't change the color of my door, for example, because it has to be in keeping with the Cotswolds. And so I thought, how are they going to feel if I want to rip up the asphalt driveway and make it, better for the environment? Is there any sort of planning permissions that somebody needs to get to make these changes?
In Gloucestershire and in Cheltenham, you do not need planning permission if you are converting your driveway to a permeable surface. So we are actually quite forward thinking in that regard. In terms of changing, like your door color, I think, there needs to be a lot of work done with some parish councils. I mean, we work with Charlton Kings and they are so unbelievably supportive and helpful. But in other respects, when I try and do simple things like put a pond in somewhere, you think I would be asking to go to Mars. So we really do need, I think we need more young people in councils. We need a lot more environmentally educated people working in policy, so that we can just remove all these silly barriers, and move away from the aesthetics being more important. You mentioned the astroturf, and I think that is really indicative of, I want to say the word, illness, the fact that we would cover our earth with plastic because it means we don't have to do anything. But actually then, after 5 or 10 years, the grass grows up where it's faded anyway, and then it gets thrown away. And then, we need to move away from this mentality of just zero maintenance, and accept that with life there's so much beauty that comes with toil and engaging with our earth, and getting mud under our fingernails, and yes, I love the idea of making like a DIY SOS. We'll get Nick Knowles back in, and we'll make a great series of environmental makeovers. I will make that happen.
Excellent. That's your challenge for 2025.
Yeah.
I was wondering about sedum. You mentioned that as a plant that's quite resistant to drought and that sort of thing. Are there any other plants that you would recommend for kind of green roofs or driveways?
Yeah, so anything basically when you're in the garden centre, anything that has very thick rubbery leaves. Sedum is a really, really good one, particularly because you can sort of separate it and just stick it in. And if you're walking, if a friend has lots growing, you can just take lots from their garden. But I think lobelia is a really nice one because that sort of hangs down. Anything, I mean, things that self-seed as well, so that you've got that continual. So if you've got your wildflower mix, things like yellow rattle, for example, will compete with grass because you don't really want the grass, you want the plant. So get some yellow rattle in there. Get your like oxeye daisies, anything that has a thick rubbery leaf, have a look for.
Okay. And I'm just thinking, you did mention some funding as well. Sorry, Sam. Just another thought or approach might be to look at funding that is related to climate change. And maybe people can get looking at funding for changing the drives or the parking areas for community buildings or village halls. That sort of a thing might be an option as well for people.
Yeah, definitely. I think often when you have your building being planned, you just get the cheapest thing possible. But I mean, even if budgets are tight, you can still have areas that don't have the concrete, so that you've got these little channels, these little drainage spots. And yeah, I mean, the Environment Agency is always worth having a look on their website for funding. Like National Lottery is often a good bet, and your parish council as well, for that area is worth going and having a chat with them about it.
Yeah, I think Caring for the Cotswolds might have funding available as well for this sort of a thing. So, Sam, did you have a point?
I did. I was gonna go to water butts. I know so many people that have got water butts, but the problem I tend to find was that they don't actually empty them once they're full. So therefore they become sort of null and void in a sense. So I just wanted to point out what I've done with my water butt is I've drilled a hole in the top and put a hose in it and then run the hose down the garden, so that when that water butt is full, the excess water is then going into the garden. Because otherwise, once it's full, it just generally goes straight back into the drain.
Yeah. We did actually put a really nice water butt on one of the driveways, which was both a planter and a water butt. I wonder if people don't empty them because maybe they don't have like a tap on them, and if there's a tap, then it's a bit more accessible, or they don't quite think about lifting it up. But yeah, there are so many things, if you just pop over to Homebase and get some plastic tubes, you can be diverting that water into in fun ways, particularly if you have children. You can get fun little like water wheels, for example, so the water can be diverted into a water wheel before it then goes into the water butt. And if you really looked at the information about how many chemicals are used to clean the water that we're using to water our plants with, and how much energy has gone into that, then being able to cut that out and just use the water straight from the rain, not only is it so much better for the environment, but it's so much better for your plants as well. It doesn't have all of those nasties that have been used to treat that water. It's your plants are going to be healthier, so it's win-win. But yeah, we need the water butt that we used on the driveways had a nice trailing like lobelia coming down, and little miniature daisies, so it was beautiful, as well as having the tap on the bottom for you to be able to. I think it needs to be easily accessible and just brought into your routine, just get into the habit of it.
I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the fact that we're using drinkable water for, watering our gardens or washing our cars. To my mind, every single new build should have an underground storage rainwater catchment container to actually be used as grey water for recycling. And that would dramatically reduce flooding across all of the catchments if we were to implement something like that. It just seems like for some reason, they think that it's going to cost a lot of money, but actually to do it later, I looked at having a storage tank put in and trying to use the rainwater for my toilets, and it was going to cost thousands and thousands of pounds. But had they have actually put that in at the beginning when the house was built, it would have made a really big difference. I would have looked at buying a property that had that as a benefit, but also the money that you're saving from, potential flooding downstream is significant, and it's something we really, really need to look at, is how we use our water resource
Yeah. And also, just as an aside, it's a project that we're going to start looking into for next year. Is that people really need to look at their pipe work that comes from their grey water, particularly their washing machines. And often the pipes that come from the washing machines are going straight into the storm drains. So that water isn't being cleaned or filtered in any way. And all of that soapy water is going straight into our rivers. And we wonder why our rivers are so polluted. So when our houses are built or modified, I think predominantly when they're modified, and you just stick that pipe into that drain, that can cause huge problems. So it's not only how we conserve water, it's how we deal with our wastewater, which is a really, really important. So go and look at your out pipes for your washing machine and your sink, and if they go into an open drain, then that's probably a storm drain. So there's no filter at all from your washing machine to the river.
Yeah, and you can also use the
think
dye
that's-
tracing, can't you? Which helps. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, what you didn't mention was the microplastics that also come from the clothes that we wash, but it's another kettle of fish.
That's a whole other kettle of fish. Yeah. I feel like I bury my head in the sand with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All these things we need to be more aware of. And I think like the microplastics can be really helped with just not washing our clothes as often. And yeah, obviously, like wearing clothes that are more natural, and the more natural the clothing, the less they need to be washed anyway. And yeah, putting that load on a lower temperature, and putting less clothes in the washing machine drum as well, I think stops the friction. But I'm not an expert on microplastics, but yeah, all these things to be mindful of.
Bringing it back to flood management, especially on new developments where they're sort of incorporating suds into the development site. I mean, I don't know whether you're able to tell me who's meant to be responsible for those sites and the maintenance, and sort of who owns that land. I mean, they're great for the first few years, but around here they seem to get a bit neglected, and then after sort of however many years, they then block up and become sort of less efficient than maybe they were sort of originally designed to be.
I mean, I know that Cheltenham Borough Council did some wonderful work with their swales and scrapes as part of Cheltenham Borough homes. I guess the big housing estates, but it's tricky, isn't it? Because the housing estates become slowly sold off to independent buyers, but surely they should still be responsible, as that overarching.
I didn't know whether it's a case that actually local district councils could almost adopt those sort of natural areas so that they can make sure that they're looked after and maintained properly.
Yeah. But typically what needs to happen is the local community, they need to get involved, don't they? And sort of, start shaking the council owners or shaking the actual owners themselves. So I think it needs to be a bottom up effect, the community really looking at the problems and identifying them and making them more public and getting some actionable results.
I think that's a really good point. Lots of different organizations are basically saying it's down to people power. When people get unhappy enough and start being vocal and demanding some of these things are implemented, then they will happen. But until we do, nothing is going to get better, really, because there's no incentive for businesses or developers or councils to do anything. And if we delay actually implementing some of these things like rainwater gardens and suds, it's going to become hugely it's really a financial burden, I think, trying to recover from the damage that's created, isn't it? Rather than preventing it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, if your house floods, you may get an insurance payout the first year, but you're probably not going to be reinsured because you're in a flood risk area. And then what happens? And not only is that, devastating for you financially, but environmentally, if your house floods, again and again, that's your furniture, your sofa, your carpets you're going to have to throw away. So it's such an environmental toll.
Yeah.
And yeah, all around the world, it's getting worse and worse. So we really, I mean, let's be honest, we had to start reducing the climate heating a long time ago, and we had to be doing this 50 years ago, but we're making starts. And I think with the big housing developments, at least they are building these water catchment areas. I used to live in a new build in Gloucester, and it was actually quite miraculous seeing all the water suddenly swirling and being captured in these swales and being moved on. But there needs to be more, and there needs to be a lot more work done with the older houses and the established infrastructure that we have, because it just can't cope.
No, absolutely. So I think the overall message to people is to look into your community, look at your own garden and see what you can do. Start from home, look at your community, and then, maybe write to your MP and say, look, this is really important. We need to make national policies that require these things. Every new bus shelter that goes up should have a green roof and that kind of a thing. And water butts, we should all have water butts for these underground storage containers going in. I think there's a great amount of potential, isn't there? We just need to, we've been conditioned to think a certain way with our gardens, nice, beautiful landscaped grass. We just need to stop that conditioning and be more creative, don't we?
Yeah, we're not in the Victorian era anymore. Like, we don't need these straight edges. We need to stop using glyphosate weed killer. All of that goes straight into the water. It comes up in the pollen, in the nectar. We need a huge overhaul. And I think often, I think when people feel the need to constantly control the weeds, and I think it's often there's some healing within people that is needed, as opposed to your garden needing to be different. So I think if we can work on ourselves as well, and that can come through joining a stronger community, joining your local conservation group, your local Friends of the Earth, your local parish council. That sense of community can do a lot of healing. And just having those little conversations with people like, maybe leave that patch in your garden for the hedgehog. I think, it can all be a beautiful sort of a cycle as to when you begin making these changes, and the fruitfulness it can bring.
I've just had a message from Maxie. I think she's on the Temple Guyton Parish Council, and she says that they make sure that the developments now have a binding agreement in the planning permissions to make sure that these suds are maintained. And the standard period for that is 25 years. And she said, it's now a planning requirement.
Great, perfect. Yeah, some some things are changing. Yeah, there are lots and I think Wales is much more ahead than the UK in terms of its SUDS. I think, yeah, there's lots of things that we're trying to push through that just aren't. But that's good to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Fab. Well, if no one else has got a question, then I'm going to put one to you, Heather. We ask every guest at the end of a session, what is your favourite book?
My favourite book is Cider with Rosie by Laurie Lee. I hadn't actually read this book until I moved. I live in Stroud. And if anyone is local to Stroud, I think I started to go to the Woolpack and learning about this infamous author. And then a friend gave me Cider with Rosie, and I read it one winter in my cabin by my log burner. And I've just never been so taken away into such a beautiful world. And it was Stroud 100 years ago when everything was so bountiful and community was so tight, and the olden ways of walking for an entire day to go and visit an auntie, and the way the old ladies would pick the flowers and make these witchy herbal tinctures and teas. And Laurie Lee has such a phenomenal way of describing what he saw, that I just find it so intoxicating. So if you want to disappear into this countryside Cotswold paradise, then Cider with Rosie is one that I would recommend.
Perfect. I think that's what we all need to do at the minute, is just have a little bit of an escapism occasionally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Great, thank you both. And yeah, do keep an eye on the Wildlife Trust's website. We are often giving talks on a Thursday lunchtime. We do lots of volunteering, so lots of opportunities come up with us, and we will be developing our website, our Waterscapes website. So there'll be a little video on there of how to build a rain garden. So there'll be resources to help you in this area.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll catch everyone else in 2 weeks. I haven't got the date on me, Jen.
That's all right. Yep. We'll be advertised on our social media.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.